when you review your exam, make sure you have gone through all the instructional videos, you have your notes and completed your homework, and also the quiz on D2L, and also the supplemental homework on D2L. So 1.1, like make sure you know the definition of statistic, population, sample, raw data, sample statistic, population parameter. Know the process of statistic, and some of the question may ask you to fill in the blanks, and so you need to know if they are talking about the number from population, that would be population parameter because it's from population, right? And if the number is coming from a sample, that would be sample statistic, and because it's basing on sample. So you may have fill in the blanks like that. And also, I may give you an example, and you need to identify the population, sample, raw data, sample statistic, and population parameter. So I already graded your quiz. Make sure you go through it and see if you understand that. You need to know how to calculate the margin of error. Basically, just like whatever the sample statistic, you subtract the margin of error and then add the margin of error. Then the population parameter would be between those 2%. For 1.2, we will look at more terms such as census, representative sample, and bias. We talk about multiple sampling methods. So if we give you a scenario, you need to be able to figure out which sampling we are doing. The one that we focus on including simple random sampling, so it just randomly selected some participants. Systematic sampling means you pick every third, every fifth, every 10th, something like that. Convenient sampling is just like whoever you can get them to participate. Maybe you run into them, maybe you just call some people, and whoever willing to participate would be convenient sampling. The clusters and the stratified are the two that seems to be more confusing for students. So both of them will divide the participant into groups. The cluster will pick every single members from the selected groups, and stratified divide into subgroups and then still pick random sample from each group. So those are the specific differences, and we have the quiz. I have some questions about that, so you will see some more like those questions on the test. Make sure you review the graded quiz. We also talk about descriptive and inferential statistic. Descriptive is basically describing what they get from the sample. Inferentials would be basing on what you found out from the sample, and you try to make sense of what the population will behave like. So that would be the difference, and we have a question on the quiz also. Okay, chapter 1.3, we talk about the types of statistical studies. So two major types we want you to focus on. One is observational, one is experiments. The major difference between them are one of them, experiments, come with treatments. When we say treatments, groups, we will have a control groups which will receive no treatments, or they can receive a placebo. When we see placebo, we may say like if it's like a medicine, it could be a sugar pill. If it's like an injection, it could be salt water injections. So observational study, we focus on two other ones too. Retrospective is looking at the past data, and the prospective one is using future data. We follow up with the participant in the long term in the future and see if certain medication or lifestyle can make them healthier. So we may give you example, and you need to identify if it's an observational or experiment would be appropriate for them. A lot of time, if it's unethical, we can only do an observational studies, like if pregnant woman can smoke, if the smoking will affect babies. So it's like an unethical study. If you want it as an experiment, then we have to do an observational one. But if we checking on like a vaccine, if it's effective or not, we may have to run an experiment and have the treatment group and the placebo control group. So you may have scenario that I ask you to identify them, and I may also have scenario and ask you to identify which one would be the treatment groups, which one would be the control group. If it's like a flu vaccine, the group received the actual treatment would be the treatment groups. The one either don't receive the treatment or receiving like a saltwater injection, then it would be the placebo groups. So you may have example like this on the test. It also talk about the different effects, like the experimenter effects, mean like the experimenter may have certain facial expressions or the tone of voice and give it away that like certain group is getting the treatment or not. It also have the placebo effect. Some participants feel better just because they are receiving something and they thought they are receiving the treatments. To make it more effective for an experiment study, sometimes we use binding, and we have the single and double binding. The single binding is going to be the one that only the participant don't know if they received the treatment or not. The double binding would be both the participants and also the experimenter will not know who get the treatment or not. Only the researcher know who's like getting the treatment or not the treatment. So those would be a question you will see on the test. Make sure you practice them and study for that, okay? Next is 1.4, should we believe a statistical study? So you need to be aware of the 8 different guidelines that your textbook provided, including identify the goals and study population observational or experiments. So make sure like after the study, they are still measuring the goals of particular study. Otherwise, there's no reason to do that statistical study, right? The next one is consider the source. We gave you the example. If a coffee manufacturer tell you drinking coffee is healthy, maybe that is biased. So you have to consider who give you this information. Do they get profit from it if they tell you a study goes certain way? Another one is the bias of sample. If you let people volunteering to participate in the study or they even pay money to be part of the study, the participant may be a little bit biased depending on how they pick the sample, so that could be a problem. Look for problem in defining or measuring variable of interest. So in the textbook, they give you that example about they think they successfully stopping only about 10% to 20% of illegal drug entering the US. That is something difficult to measure because we don't know the total of it. So to say you stop 10 to 20% is meaningless. And then the next guideline would be beware of the confounding variable. Like for this one, I think we talk about maybe student listening to classical music, they can perform better, but we may not consider maybe the same group of people also have plenty of sleep. So some of the other variable may affect the results. And the next guideline would be careful with the wording of the survey. So the example we gave you in class is like, do you favorite in text cuts? If you present it like that, most people will say yes. But if you change the wording a little bit and say, do you want a tax cut? If it increased the federal deficits, then it may change some people's answer. So the wording of the question on the survey sometimes is important also. Guideline 7 say check the results are presented fairly. So after your survey is done, still sometimes researcher can misrepresent them in the graphic and concluding statements. So even though all the data is correct, like the representation could be incorrect. So we have an example on number 6 talking about the reading level. You can go back to your notes and study for that. And the very last guideline is like stand back and consider the conclusion. So again, like if everything is correct, we still can come up with a wrong conclusion, and sometimes the conclusion may be not significant. And the example we gave there is diet supplements, but after all that, like the participant only lose about half of a pound because it's not significant, so that make the study not as important. All right. Next is 2.1 data types and level of measurement. So two major category. We have the categories is qualitative, the one related to numbers are quantitative. So I may have example and you need to identify if they are quantitative or qualitative. So if it's like eye color, favorite of ice cream, the brand name of the shoes would be category, so qualitative. The number of students in classes, the score in the test, or even like how many shoes of certain size. If it's related to numbers, then it would be quantitative. So you will definitely have questions like that. The next part is go a little bit further to categorize them. The quantitative with numbers, some of them are continuous, some of them are discrete. So the discrete one is like have naturally certain distinct interval values. So such as you can have 1 person, 10 person, but not 10 and a half persons. So that would be a discrete type of number. And also shoe size can be discrete, like you can have 7, 7.5, but not 7.25. So it go half at a time. So those are considered as discrete. But other number like your weight, how many pounds, it can go to many decimal places, and also like maybe measurement of how many miles you walked, again does not like a distinct interval that you have to follow. Those are continuous. All right. For the qualitative category type, we also have two types. One is coming with no order. No order is nominal. I remember the NO, such as your eye color. It doesn't have like black color go first or green color go first, so they don't have natural order. Those are nominal, no order. The one with order is ordinal, or ranking, so such as your grade A, B, C, D, E, even though they are category, they have certain ranking and order. And then or drink size, small, medium, large. So those are category type of data which is qualitative, but because they have natural order, so we consider them as ordinal. All right, so if we look at some of these, this has like a chart help you to remember category, qualitative, number, quantitative, and the category have nominal, no order, ordinal with order. The quantitative have discrete and continuous. So we have those example, and on the test we will ask you to identify them, which one is which. I know we also talk about interval and ratio. Those are a little bit harder. So on the test I may not have like that much detail, but the other part you need to know. Okay, so that's 2.1. Next, we're going to talk about 2.2, dealing with errors. So we talk about random and systematic errors. So think about the example we gave you. If you put a baby on the scale, it keeps moving around, so you cannot quite see is it 14.5 or 15. So it has some error in there, and it happens so randomly, so we call this random error. Or if you have an empty scale and it's still showing 1.2 pounds, and it's going to apply to everything you measure on this scale. So this is a systematic error. If you want to find out the true value of everything you measure on it, you will have to subtract that 1.2 out of the measurement. Okay, so that type is considered as systematic errors. So on the test, I may ask you to calculate the absolute error and relative error. Absolute error is the actual number of the error. Anytime you need to find something relative, we are looking for percentage. So absolute error would be whatever you measure, subtract the true value. So if I measure I'm 102 pounds, but I know my true weight is 100 pounds, I just subtract that, and I got 2 pounds as the absolute error. If I need to find the relative error, I put the 2 up here and put my true weight, which is 100, 2 over 100 times the 100%. That would give me my relative error. So you will have some calculation on the test, such as this one. And the next one, you talk about accuracy and precision. So accuracy is whatever you measure, if it's the closest to the true value that would be more accurate. Precision is like whatever you use to measure, if it give you like a lot of details, like instead of half of a pound, it give you 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, it give you more detail, then that would be more precise. So you need to be able to compare if something is more accurate or precise to the true values. So make sure you kind of practice the math a little bit. You may see some of them on the test. Next is 2.3, using percentage in statistics. So be sure you know how to convert number between fraction, decimal, and percentage. We went through some example together. Also, that supplemental homework quiz one, you have some questions like that. Make sure you know how to do it. And next, we need to be able to find if a percentage of a whole number, you basically multiply it and you can convert the percent to decimal, right? So make sure you know how to do that. And then again, we're going to find the absolute and relative. So the last section we did the absolute and relative error. In this section we do the absolute change and relative change. So it's a pretty similar process, so check that out. Again, relative is related to percent, right? So we have those. And let's see, it also talk about percent point compared to percent, and we did different kind of examples. So okay, the next we are going to go back to the quizzes and that you have done in D2L. So those I provide you with feedback, make sure you look into them before the exam. If you submitted your quizzes and homework practice on D2L, I will have graded it and return it back to you as a graded file like that. So please look through them for feedback. Some question will be similar like this on the exams, okay? And finally, please use the review I gave you and look through those concepts. Make sure you know them. Some of the exam question will be similar to that. Toward the end of the review, I gave you some hints what the answer is supposed to look like. So hopefully that would be helpful for you. If you have any question, please let me know, okay?